Hey everyone, welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're doing something a bit different. We're going to completely reframe how we look at modern stress and burnout. We're throwing out that old guilt trip about personal failure, right? And instead, we're diving straight into the literal biology of your brain. So, if you've been feeling just completely drained lately, let me tell you, it's not a lack of willpower. It's just biology.
So to kick things off, let's get our core premise straight. You are not failing, and you aren't lacking resilience. If we look at the root and branches model from behavioral science, things like anxiety and irritability, those are just the surface level branches. The actual root cause is what we call psychological capacity compression. Basically, that's when your cognitive resources are literally being crushed by your environment.
All right, here's our roadmap for This Explainer. We'll hit the roots of burnout, run through a quick 3-question capacity diagnostic, tackle surviving workplace cognitive overload, look at restoring your relationship bandwidth, and wrap it all up with the master recovery plan.
Let's jump right into part 1, the roots of burnout and the biological cascade of stress.
Okay, so there's this crazy domino effect that happens inside of you. When you're dealing with constant, unmitigated pressure, your brain's alarm system, which is your HPA axis, basically gets stuck in the on position. And when that happens, it just floods your entire system with cortisol and adrenaline. Now, over time, all that cortisol triggers systemic inflammation, which literally starves your brain of feel-good chemicals, serotonin and dopamine. Without those, your mood tanks and ultimately the executive decision-making center of your brain actually shrinks. You are biologically locked into that capacity compression.
Moving right along to our second section, the 3-question capacity diagnostic, using the Alkahami protocol.
Now, rather than dragging you through some massive, time-consuming questionnaire, we can use this super efficient screening approach to figure out where your capacity is at right now. So, ask yourself this first question. Are you experiencing any difficulties with sleep? Just take a quick second and be totally honest with yourself.
Well, if you answered yes, it actually tells us quite a bit. It means the sustained adrenaline and cortisol from that biological alarm system we just talked about are actively messing with your natural sleep-wake cycle. You're caught in a systemic loop that leaves you dealing with this chronic, deep... All right, on to the second question. Let's do a quick check on your recent cognitive performance. Have you noticed any decline with your performance or your concentration lately? If you're nodding yes to this one, it means impaired neuroplasticity and dropping dopamine levels are actively chipping away at your cognitive abilities. Listen, you aren't losing your edge. Your brain is literally just running on empty. And you'll usually notice this as weird little deficits in your short-term memory, or maybe you're just struggling to hold your attention and solve logical problems like you normally do.
Okay, our final screening question targets your relational integrity and your emotional bandwidth. Are you experiencing easy anger, or do you find yourself preferring isolation? If you said yes here, it's a huge indicator that systemic inflammation has wiped out your serotonin levels. It takes your normal baseline of patience and replaces it with rapid irritability, an urge to socially withdraw, or maybe you're just super defensive in how you communicate. And here's the absolute kicker. Answering yes to even just one of these 3 questions means your psychological resources are officially compressed. Let's pivot over to the professional side of things with part 3, surviving workplace cognitive overload, looking at team cognitive load and sales emotional intelligence. Take a look at this finding from a 2025 study in Scientific Reports. It's super compelling. The big takeaway here is that systemic organizational failures, I'm talking about role ambiguity, clunky software platforms that force you to constantly switch contexts, and high transaction costs, those are what actually drain your working memory. Your exhaustion at work isn't because you lack grit. It is a structural issue. High team cognitive load and invisible mental labor are literally breaking down your mental capacity. And the financial fallout of protecting this capacity, it's kind of staggering. Take high rejection roles like sales, for example. If you apply emotional intelligence to cognitively reframe rejection as just objective business data, rather than, a personal failure, it actually prevents those acute adrenaline surges. That biological protection leads to a 12% performance boost. To put that in perspective, that equals an extra $55,000 in annual revenue per rep. So yeah, resilience literally pays, especially when it's grounded in real neurobiology. Now let's bring it back home to our interpersonal lives. Section 4, restoring your relationship bandwidth and the window of tolerance. So, when chronic stress hits you hard, it physically shrinks your window of tolerance. That's why a forgotten household chore can suddenly feel like a massive, severe threat.
Just look at this stark comparison between execution and mental load. Doing a physical task on the left, like cooking dinner, takes lower cognitive effort, and hey, you usually get praised for it. But that invisible mental load on the right, planning the meals, tracking what's in the pantry, anticipating everyone's needs, that causes immense, unvalidated neurobiological strain. It's basically a state of resting vigilance that just never turns off. If you want to fairly share this burden and restore your relationship bandwidth, you've got to stop just dividing up the physical chores. Instead, you need to assign complete end-to-end ownership of specific domestic domains to one partner. Think about it. If you own meal planning, you own the grocery list, the actual shopping, and the cooking, the whole shebang. Doing it this way completely eliminates duplicate mental tracking and frees up a massive amount of your partner's cognitive resources. And when your capacity gets really low, couples so often fall into this trap of destructive conflict aversion. You just swallow your disappointments to keep a fragile peace, right? To break that cycle, couples should use Dr. Patrice Walter's framework. Step 1, know your feelings. Actually identify your true internal state. Step 2, contain your feelings. Really resist that initial urge to instantly withdraw or lash out. And step 3, learn to be curious, not furious. Basically, replace your defensiveness with open-ended curiosity. Finally, we reach the actionable rebuilding phase. Section 5, the Master Recovery Plan and Systemic Protocols for Capacity Restoration. Rebuilding your capacity absolutely requires a multi-layered approach. Now, under clinical guidance, this might involve pharmacological interventions like SSRIs or bupropion to halt the breakdown of your neurotransmitters, but that works best when it's perfectly paired with targeted nutrition to rebuild them. Think of omega-3s as your biological shield against inflammation. Magnesium is the off switch for that overactive alarm system we talked about earlier. And your vitamin D and B complex, those are literally the building blocks your brain needs to synthesize serotonin and dopamine. All right, let's bring it all together into your master action plan. In the workplace, operational simplification protects your working memory. Over in sales, using emotional intelligence stops those nasty adrenaline surges. At home, shared domain ownership dramatically lowers defensive reactivity. And for your overall wellness, targeted nutrition restores your baseline neurotransmitters. These aren't just buzzwords, they are concrete biological steps to literally expand your psychological capacity. As we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with a provocative thought. Maintaining your psychological capacity isn't some nice-to-have luxury. It is an urgent biological necessity. You now know the science of exactly what happens when that capacity compresses. So, looking at your life right now, both personal and professional, what invisible load are you going to choose to completely offload today to protect your mind? Thanks so much for hanging out with me, and I hope this empowers you to reclaim your cognitive architecture. Catch you next time.